Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayedhi Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Our topic today is Vedanta as a mirror. Vedanta is, of course, all of you are already familiar. It's an ancient philosophy that originated in the Indian subcontinent. And that's what we talk about most of the time in our programs here. And there are different ways Vedanta has been understood, dissected, analyzed, and people have tried to interpret it in their many different ways. And one of the ways we can understand Vedanta as a mirror. Now, mirror is something that we are all familiar with. All of us have one or maybe more mirrors of different sizes at our home. And we spend varying amounts of time in front of the mirror. And we know a mirror is useful, especially when we are going out, when we want to make sure we are presentable or not. We stand before a mirror, and then whatever the mirror tells us, and we take it as, that's who I am. And so a mirror is definitely useful. But a mirror clearly also has a lot of limitations. For one thing, a mirror will show how I appear. If you stand before a mirror, it tells you how you appear. But not the whole of us. It really just reflects just the body. So it gives us a fairly, depending on how clean the mirror is, and that it's not like a concave or a convex mirror, it kind of fairly gives us a fairly good idea about our appearance. But we know that no matter how acceptable or wonderful our appearance might look in a mirror, and we might feel that it might be acceptable to the people we meet as we go through our day's activities, we might find that people might still may find us not acceptable. And so we might wonder whether they are seeing something in me which my mirror is not able to show. And that's pretty obviously, there is a more to every one of us than just this physical body. There is a lot that's in me, but which is not a part of the body. And that generically sometimes we just refer to it as the mind. The mind, the intellect, the ego, the hopes, the fears, my dreams, my memories. All of these are a part of who I am, but none of them are a part of the body, and none of them get shown in the mirror. So we need a different kind of mirror. And some people have looked upon Vedanta as that kind of mirror. And the reason for that is that from the very earliest parts, when this philosophy took root in the minds of people who began to ask questions about life, about the world, about themselves, they very quickly, they zeroed in on this idea of the self. Because it's natural for us that when we look out and start asking questions about the world, because that's what we see. But not often we start asking about the questions, asking questions about the one who is asking questions. So that was the thing, because in the beginning, we look at the world and say, from where did this world come? How did creation start? What's the purpose of life? Which inevitably takes us to some transcendent being or source. We just generically refer to that divine source as God. So, discussions about God, ideas about God, concepts about God, we find in different religious theories and discussions and traditions. But what about the person who is experiencing this world? Who is this? Who am I who is asking these questions? And so the inquiry, rather than looking upon the world outside, very quickly turned inside. And that's why the question that gets more time, so to speak, in Vedantic thinking is about the self. And so it may be possible to say that Vedanta holds before us a self mirror. Sometimes we know that nowadays very few people carry conventional cameras, maybe professionals do. Most of us already have a smartphone, and that pretty much acts does the role of the camera for most of us. Now, it has cameras on both sides, behind as well as in front. So we might see how many of the pictures we take are selfies and how many are not selfies. And clearly, when we take a picture, we're trying to capture something outside. When we take a selfie, we just want to see how we appear. So we might think about Vedanta as some kind of a selfie taking, but a deeper self. It doesn't limit only to this, my external appearance, but helps me look deeply inside. Swami Vivekananda once he wrote to J.J. Goodwin, who was his secretary and who took down the transcripts of most of the lectures that Swami Vivekananda gave. And so we are eternally grateful for this British. He was a British origin. He took down these lectures. And in one letter and he became a disciple of Swami Vivekananda as well. So one of the letters that Swamiji wrote to him, he says in the beginning, we Vedantists must learn to look at everything from the subjective standpoint. And then he explains what it means. And it's this, that generally, when we look out at things and we say, why is that thing that way? Why is this person that way? Those are kind of natural questions that people ask. And looking at it from a subjective standpoint would mean, rather than asking, why is that thing that way? I say, why am I seeing it that way? Why am I seeing this person that way? So it's more about looking at things and kind of taking a selfie, so to speak, turning the camera towards oneself. And so looking upon Vedanta as this self-mirror, the next question would be, Vedanta, what is Vedanta? Vedanta is a wisdom tradition embodied in certain books. So where is this self-mirror? And the self-mirror, any student of Vedanta sooner or later discovers, is really everywhere. It's there in my mind, it's there in my room, in my workplace. The self-mirror can be discovered pretty much anywhere we turn our mind towards. If we know how to find it, we will see that it is everywhere. It's a little bit like there is a saying that we all find what we are looking for. And so life, there are infinite possibilities in the life around us. And it doesn't have to be some big adventure trip to some distant place, right? Even across, looking outside the window, just walking and strolling into the garden, walking along the Charles. If we are open, we will discover things that we may have missed before. A lot of times, our eyes are open, our ears are open. Well, not often now. Nowadays, with these ear pods, they are not always open. We choose what kind of sounds we want to hear. But if we keep it really open, then sometimes everything might fine. You might not have any ear pods, etc. But we sometimes will be so busy thinking about something, planning about something, anticipating the things that we are going to do or are expecting to happen in our lives, there are things happening around us, we may never notice it. And a self mirror is a little bit like that. The mirror is really everywhere. But if we are mindful, if we carefully look, we will see it everywhere. To begin with, one place we can find the self mirror is in our very room, the room that we normally stay in. Oftentimes we don't realize that the environment around us over which we have some control, it becomes a reflection of who we are. And sometimes we'll see, and the reason there is this connection is sometimes you will see if your workplace, your desk or your room, you vacuum your room one day well and you keep everything spick and span, dust your room, keep your desk tidy, and then you begin to feel good about it. Why should something that's done externally in your room affect the state of our mind? There is definitely some connection between what's going on, me, the inner self, the subtle part of who I am, and the environment around me. And so oftentimes we will see that if I'm confused, if I don't have a systematic way of thinking, and then things around me, whether in my room, in my home, just remain out of place. And so to have an idea about where I am, how my mind is thinking, what is the state of my mind, sometimes we just look at our room or our home, and it's reversible, as I said. It's a reverse engineering. If we want a little bit of order and peace and harmony inside the mind, it may do us well that to kind of keep our immediate surroundings at least neat and tidy, because the two are very much connected. We can discover who we are. There's one thing, as I said right in the beginning, that there is one thing that just a physical mirror can do. But to know myself better, all that I need to do is to look at my interests, my hobbies, the people I admire, my fears, my hopes, my ambitions. All of these things taken together gives me a much better, much deeper understanding of who I am as a person. And so to reveal all these aspects of my personality, the physical mirror is completely inadequate. And if I depend only on the physical mirror, I won't get to know myself at all. And that's, in one sense, the tragedy of our lives, that we today, thanks to Google and many other AI now, we know a lot about other people, a lot about distant galaxies, a lot about other things, and not as much about our own selves. And that kind of a disconnect between knowing a lot about others, little about ourselves, is because we have not had an access to something which resembles this kind of a self-mirror. So we need to become aware, not just do things mechanically, but look at our interests and hobbies and so on, see, this is who I am. And if we find, and we are likely to find, because all of us have in our mind, consciously or unconsciously, developed an idea of an ideal person. So the kind of person we would like to be. And oftentimes this becomes clearer if we find out who are our heroes in life, who are we fans of, who are the people we truly admire. Because usually the people we admire have some traits, some qualities, some features that fit into my value system, or something that I would like to emulate, something that I would like to be. And so knowing who our sources of inspiration are gives us some idea about what I would like to do, what I would like to be. And then if I look at myself mindfully and discover this is who I am now, but these are the ideals I've strived for. And a simple question would be this: if I continue to live the way I'm living now, I'm continue to do the things I'm doing now, continue to think the way I'm thinking now, say within the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, will I be any closer to this ideal person, or the person that I admire? Would I become a little bit closer to that ideal, or would I go further away? And if I find that if my life continues in the pace and in the direction in which it is going now, that I probably will not be anywhere closer to this ideal state that I have in my mind, then one must have the courage then to say, I need to make some changes. Because things won't change on their own. That's the rule of life. Unless I consciously make some intelligent changes when they are called for. We don't have to change for the sake of changing. But if we find that a way we think, the way we do, it's possible to change it for the better so that we will then become better, then we must have the courage to do that. And a self-mirror will help us do that. The self-mirror can be discovered in the choices we have in terms of what kind of friends we keep, what kind of books we like to read, what kind of television programs, movies we want to see, what kind of novels I like to read. Again, our interests and the people and the objects we surround ourselves with gives us a good idea about who I am as a person. This is a better way to try to understand who we are rather than depending exclusively on other people to determine how I am. We know that when we go shopping, we go to buy something, usually there is a price tag, a price label on the object that are being sold inside a shop. It'll be very rare that you go to a shop and there is no price mentioned, and then you want to buy something, and then you ask the salesperson there, oh, I would like to get this. How much does it cost? And what if the person says, I don't decide, you get to decide? It never happens that way. They decide the price because they are the one who are selling the thing. In some odd sort of way, if we see ourselves as beings and who I am, what is my worth as a person? Who gets to decide my worth as a human being? And oftentimes, if we don't do it ourselves, and then we exclusively depend on other people to decide who I am, that would be equivalent to that going to a shop and then saying, I don't know how much it costs, you decide it for yourself. And this is something that it happens in many lives, that we want to appear as, for instance now, if everyone says, oh, you are so loving, you are so kind, and I keep on hearing that, and then I might think, oh, I am loving and kind because that's what everyone says I am. But if the downside to that is, if you hear some praise, it's very easy to believe that these people are good judges. They know exactly. But if the same people at some time will say, you are stupid, you know nothing, then you say, oh, this person doesn't know anything. So that's the difficulty. We can't be selective then. If we hand over the responsibility of judging who we are as people to other people, then you've got to accept whatever they say. But think about it this way. How much do we know anybody? Because we know by looking at our own lives, we know that there is so much going on inside us, which other people just won't even know what's going on in our heads. The judgments that other people make about us is mostly with our appearance and how we come across. If they have conversations with us, if they spend time with us, then people come to judge. And yet, the full me may not be revealed completely outside. And so with this very limited data, other people make judgments about us. But then, same thing we are doing with regard to other people as well. And so the reality is that the only person who can know me fully, completely, is myself. And if I don't choose to do it, if I just depend on other people's opinion about me, then I'm never going to know who I am. And therefore, the self-mirror gives us a better way to understand ourselves fully. We can also, this helps also in understanding other people. Because just as every one of us has a self-mirror, every person we meet has a self-mirror as well. And so if and when we have acquired the ability to look inside our self-mirrors, learn from it, and improve ourselves, then slowly, with time, we will acquire the ability to look into the self-mirrors of other people as well. And that's essentially what the ability that many of these great ones, the enlightened ones, they had that ability. So we read in the lives of pretty much all of these great world teachers, we see that whenever anyone went to meet them, speak to them, they could know exactly what was going on in the mind of the person in front of them. Sri Ramakrishna once said that when a person comes before me, I can see inside them as if seen through a glass case. I don't know whether that's wonderful or not. Some of us are going to feel extremely uncomfortable because there are things we want to keep private. There are things we don't want others to know. And if someone says, I can look inside you as through a glass case. But how did they acquire that ability? He wasn't just boasting about it. Oftentimes, people who went, they found that he was answering their questions even before they had formulated the question and mentioned that to him. And it's not something that only Ramakrishna could do or any of these great ones could do. That's something, an ability that can come to all of us. It's looking at, think about it this way. For instance, how quickly sometimes we start judging other people. For instance, now one example would be you're walking along the street, from the other side, an acquaintance of yours is coming, and then you just say, good morning to that person. And that person maybe just doesn't respond back or just ignores you. And then you're hurt. We are hurt because I wish this person good morning and this person didn't reply. And then I might get angry and I get upset and say, never again in my life I'm going to wish that person. That seems to be like a natural human reaction. But if I have an access to the self-mirror, or at least I can look inside and consider other possibilities. Maybe this person didn't sleep well last night, or maybe there is some problem weighing on this person's mind because of which this person is not in a frame of mind. Maybe that person didn't even hear what I said, or wasn't possible for that person to respond. Then I might be a little bit more forgiving, recognizing that oftentimes, unconsciously, I may have ignored some similar greetings from other people in my own life. Because a lot of times, people who are ready to judge other people don't often recognize that they are open, susceptible to being judged by others as well. And usually, the more kind and forgiving we are, nature functions in such a way, there is a greater possibility with that kind of generous, forgiving nature, the way we come across, the way we deal with them will be such that that similar reaction would be evoked from the other person as well. So the more forgiving and generous we become, the more forgiving and generous people around us become as well. Because consciously we may not have hurt anybody, but unconsciously, because we were busy thinking or indifference for whatever reason, we may have hurt other people without even knowing that we have hurt them. Just like this person may have hurt me without even having the intention of hurting me. So access to one's own self-mirror gives us a chance to look at the self-mirrors of others as well. So we see that there are lots of benefits of this way of looking at things subjectively. An objective way is pretty much the way everyone follows. But a subjective way helps us kind of pause a little bit, not immediately jump to conclusions. And so the self-mirror, the first benefit it gives us is that it gives me a better chance to know myself, as I said. And to have, now when I say know myself, the word that gets often used in Vedanta is self-knowledge. And the self really, you could think in terms of self with a capitalized S or a small s. And the ultimate, the state of enlightenment is sometimes described as knowing exactly who I am, this infinite spirit, the Atman, the Brahman. But even before we reach that state, what we need is a kind of a lower self-knowledge. Unless we have a lower self-knowledge, there is no chance of getting that higher self-knowledge. And a lower self-knowledge is just knowing who I am as a person right now. Yes, unenlightened in that highest sense. But who am I now? Where am I now? Clearly, again, thanks to technology, that is not so much a problem today about where I am now, because GPS and you know exactly all the latitude, longitude of where you are. But you know that the world did exist before smartphones and GPS came into being. Some of us are old enough to know that there used to be these big maps we sometimes carried when we had to go long distance driving. And that time, we needed to know where we were before. Clearly, even if we knew where we wanted to go, right now, where am I? I need to know my starting point and my destination, and then I can chart out a route that I could follow this road and reach there. So exactly in the same way, many of us, thanks to the books and the knowledge that is, or information that's available to us, many of us have some idea about what the ultimate purpose and goal of life is. Where do we want to be? What we need to do? But the other part is, where am I now? What is my starting point? And we really need to have that knowledge, which is extremely important. It's one story that I have told on many earlier occasions. And so anyway, I'm going to tell you again. So was this about a person who was somehow feeling that there was some complexes within. That somebody said, oh, you are suffering from an inferiority complex. And so he thought it best to kind of get the advice of an expert rather than just hearing what people are saying and so on. And so he has some psychological tests done to find out whether really that complex is there. And when the test results arrive, the physician tells him, I have good news for you. You are not suffering from inferiority complex. You are inferior. But I think that's a good self-knowledge. If I know I'm inferior, it's better to be inferior and know that I'm inferior than to be inferior and think I'm a superior. Because that way, I'm just deluding myself. So if I know where I am, me as a person, and the reality is simply this, that everyone in the world, other than a person who is an enlightened being, everyone in the world has some strengths some weaknesses, some good points, some not so good points. That's who we are as human beings, our strengths and weaknesses. We don't have to go on advertising our weaknesses to the world. That's not what I'm saying. But at least we should be aware ourselves that these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. Because that kind of a fairly accurate self-appraisal is so helpful in then going forward in the kind of choices I make and the decisions I take. Because all that I need to do then in future, if I have to decide, then I have to ask myself, will doing this or thinking this way, will it somehow at least preserve my strength or at least remove my weakness? If it can do either of these things, I should say yes to it. But if any way of thinking or doing, if it's going to make me more weak, if it's going to increase my drawbacks or actually weaken my strengths, then I should say no to it. But in order to reach that point, I must first know what my strengths and weaknesses are. And so that kind of a self-appraisal is not always that easy. In some ways, most of us are better at judging other people than judging ourselves. And the reason, the difficulty in judging oneself, appraising oneself, is that it's difficult to objectify oneself. And so people who are extremely egoistic are not able to do that kind of a self-examination, become very difficult. So a little bit of ego reduction is necessary so that I can, it's almost like metaphorically coming out of myself, so to speak, and looking at myself as just a person. Right now, every one of us looks at oneself as, this is me. But can I at least kind of imagine I've come out of myself and saying, this is the person? Actually, it can be extremely humbling experience to look at ourselves as simply a person. Yes, I know the benefits of self-esteem and all of that, that's true. But, and in some ways, every one of us is unique, also true. But in a different sort of way, if we just look among the billions and billions of beings on this planet, I'm just one person. And I'm a nobody. The world will not miss me even for a moment if I go. That's the reality. It's not a very pleasant way to assess, because everyone, the idea of self-importance can be, but actually this is the reality. If we are able to make peace with this idea, actually it's extremely liberating, because we often don't realize this kind of putting on a kind of a persona, the kind of person we would want the world to take us to be, is a heavy burden. And just to be ourselves, just the free, spontaneous beings, without a care that this is who I am, can we be as transparent and say, this is who I am, with all my faults and strengths and goodness and evil, this is who I am. Again, I'm not saying that people should go on doing like that, but that is the state of freedom, where we are true to ourselves without one of the, I forget who, they said that about Vedic thinkers, the ancient sages, the Vedas, to whom the Upanishads were revealed, and who wrote commentaries on all of that. And so the phrase that was used was, they were free to express what they did because they had no public to please and critics to appease. And we realize with our so-called boasted freedom, we're not really as free as we think. So much of what we do is conditioned or controlled by what will other people think? What will these people do? How am I expected to be? There's so much unseen pressures on us. Now, all of those pressures may have some utility, but we can navigate those pressures better in a better way if we have access to this self mirror. A good knowledge about who I am will help me become a truly authentic and a real person in life. So the first thing it does, it helps me, acquaints me with my true self. And which kind of follows from this, if I know who I am, the lower self-knowledge, then I will know what I should do going forward. It's possible for me to improve myself, to become a better version of myself, if I have a good knowledge of who I am. It also, one other thing it can do is, sometimes we might see, sometimes some people would be kind of a kind of self-promotion. Often, some time back when I was visiting a place, and there was this gentleman who came to pick me up and was giving me a ride in their car. And on the way, this person kept on telling me things about, oh, this is what I did 25 years ago and 20 years ago, and this is... And I was not interested at all, but I kept on listening. Of course, they were giving me a ride, so I had to, otherwise they'll ask me to get down from the car. But I was wondering in my mind, why is this person telling me all this? I didn't even ask that person about who they are, what they're doing. It is kind of an just... And then it seemed to me that, I mean, to a more benign explanation would be, this person wanted me to know who he was, and which is not a bad thing at all. But on the other hand, sometimes that kind of, especially kind of a boastful narration of the things one has done in life, we don't realize that to any other person how that might come across as. And oftentimes when we begin to look at this self-mirror idea, we realize we don't really have to speak much about ourselves at all, because who we are, unbeknownst to us, is already being revealed to others. Just as who other people are, unbeknownst to them, is already being revealed to any good observer. About Thich Nhat Hanh, that great Vietnamese monk who passed away not too long ago, I think Thomas Merton once said about him that the way he enters a room and closes the door behind him, I know he is a real monk. So again, people who are observant through little actions, the way someone speaks, nods, talks, or responds, tells us a lot about that person, which probably reading a complete biography of that person may not give us. So every one of us is already revealing ourselves. We don't even need to look at their Facebook posts. Even without that, just seeing a person, a lot is being revealed already. And so it just keeps us humble. And then we find that there is very little need to go on. Of course, I recognize that some people feel that the kind of world in which we live, self-promotion is a part of it, because other people are doing it, and if I don't do it, I'll be left behind, and then we kind of get into the rat race. But that is the reality, according to Vedanta. And because we are able to look into the self-mirrors of other people, we have a better understanding about the people around us, especially the people who we meet, our family, our friends, and having access, looking at the person totally, not simply in their appearance, improves relationships, brings about greater harmony, because we something that is not revealed immediately through an external appearance gets revealed through their self mirrors. So, some of these ideas I thought this morning I would like to share with you were about this idea of looking upon Vedanta not simply as some abstract teachings in books which can be found in the Gita and the Upanishad, then of course, all of that. But reading those texts is not about learning some abstract set of principles, but something that help us reveal the deeper person that each one of us is within us. And so give some thought to this. See, none of what I said is something totally new. All of us are already aware of most of these things. But give some thought to this and see how who we are, every one of us, who we are as a being, how we can improve ourselves, and the people around us, can we try to understand them and be with them? Because that is the way spiritual life becomes strong. It's not simply about just sitting in one place and praying and meditating, which is important, because that's one way we can discover that self-mirror well. But spiritual life cannot be reduced to simply a few minutes of praying and few minutes of meditating in the morning and evening, or going to a place of worship once a week. It has to be a revelation in our own personal way that is occurring every moment of our life. And that's what Vedanta can help us in our own journey in this way. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhu.